Every afternoon, after leaving work, Gabriel followed the same path. The bustling city streets, filled with the noise of cars and the distant sound of strangers' conversations, became a part of his routine. The 30-minute walk home was a time when he processed the day, reflected on his challenges, and tried to make sense of his life. But something always bothered him. Right in the middle of a narrow alley, just a few meters from his house, there was a stone. It wasn't a massive rock, but it was strategically positioned so that if someone didn't pay attention, they would stumble over it. Every time Gabriel passed by, he felt the same frustration. Why doesn't anyone remove this damn stone, he would ask himself. One day, after an especially tough day at work, where his boss unfairly reprimanded him for a mistake he hadn't made, Gabriel was even more aggravated when he saw the stone. He felt the urge to kick it away, but something held him back. That day, the stone felt different. It wasn't just a stone anymore, it symbolized all the challenges he'd been facing. Gabriel was exhausted. Exhausted from being misunderstood, tired of fighting for recognition that never seemed to come, and weary of seeing his dreams always within reach but somehow always slipping away. He crouched down and looked more closely at the stone. It was medium-sized, with an irregular shape that made it even more annoying. But at that moment, Gabriel made a decision. Instead of complaining about the stone, he would do something different. He decided to leave it there, not as an obstacle, but as a marker. The next day, after another exhausting day at work, Gabriel walked back home, and there it was, the stone. This time, he looked at it differently. Instead of seeing it as a hindrance, he saw it as a test, a daily reminder that no matter how tough the day had been, he was still standing, still moving forward. He tied a small ribbon around the stone, a colorful ribbon he had in his backpack, and smiled to himself. That stone would represent his resilience. Days went by, and every time Gabriel finished his workday, there was the stone. Surprisingly, he began to look forward to that moment. The stone was no longer a nuisance, it had become a sort of ritual. Each day he passed by it without tripping, without getting irritated, without complaining, was a day in which he proved to himself that he could overcome anything. However, life didn't seem eager to make things easier for him. The company he worked for went through restructuring, and Gabriel, who was already struggling, found himself in an even more precarious position. The pressure mounted, the targets became unreachable, and the feeling of failure loomed. At home, the bills piled up, and Gabriel felt the weight of his responsibilities growing heavier by the day. Yet, no matter how much everything seemed to be falling apart, he kept walking home, and there was his stone. The symbol of his silent resistance. One night, exhausted after a meeting where he was harshly criticized, Gabriel felt like giving up on everything. The path to the stone seemed longer, and when he finally arrived, he felt an almost uncontrollable urge to throw it far away. But before he could act on the impulse, a memory came to mind. The stone is here to remind you that you can overcome. He took a deep breath, and instead of kicking the stone, he sat beside it. He stayed there for a few minutes, reflecting. At that moment, Gabriel realized something essential. The stone wasn't just a symbol of external challenges but also of internal ones. It represented his fears, insecurities, and the constant struggle against self-sabotage. And just as he could choose how to react to the stone, he could also choose how to face his own thoughts. He didn't have to let difficulties define him. In the days that followed, Gabriel adopted a new attitude at work. Instead of letting the criticism bring him down, he used it to grow. Instead of running from responsibilities, he faced them head-on, just as he did with the stone. And over time, something extraordinary began to happen. The recognition he had sought started to appear. Small compliments, more important tasks, opportunities for growth, all seemed to arise unexpectedly, but Gabriel knew it was the result of his inner change. And the stone? Well, it was still there, in the same spot. Now, though, it wasn't just Gabriel who noticed it. Other people walking the same path began to see the ribbon he had left on the stone. Some found it curious, others ignored it, but for Gabriel, it was a symbol of a personal journey. Months passed, and Gabriel, now promoted at work, reflected on his journey. He remembered all the times he had thought about giving up, complaining about his circumstances, or rebelling against the world. But the stone, that small stone in the path, had taught him a valuable lesson. Challenges don't exist to bring us down but to shape us. They are there to remind us that strength doesn't come from the absence of difficulties but from the ability to overcome them, day after day. One day, when Gabriel walked through the alley, he noticed the stone was no longer there. Someone, perhaps by accident or necessity, had removed it. But in that moment, he realized that the stone had served its purpose. It didn't need to be there physically anymore because its lesson was engraved deeply in his mind and heart. The stone in Gabriel's path was more than an obstacle. It was a symbol of his daily struggle, his ability to rise in the face of adversity, and his transformation of something seemingly insignificant into a source of strength. In life, we all encounter our own stones, challenges that seem to block our way forward. But instead of seeing them as obstacles, we can use them as markers of resilience, as reminders that no matter how tough the road, we have the strength to keep moving forward. The stone may be removed from the path, but the lessons it teaches remain forever. This story inspires us to reflect on how we can turn adversities into opportunities for personal growth, and how, sometimes, the greatest obstacles are also our greatest sources of learning. I hope you enjoyed this story. Share it with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Resilience and Faith, and leave a comment sharing your experiences. See you next time.